The alien arena shook with the sound of thousands of voices. Banners of fire and light waved in the air, all for one purpose: to see the Queen's champion crush the strange human. Who dared to challenge him from her throne? The alien queen smiled with pride. Her champion had never lost. Her maids stood beside her, whispering and laughing about how quickly the human would fall. But when the gates opened, the human walked in slowly, without fear and without heavy armor, just a simple sword in his hand. The champion roared, charging forward like a storm. The crowd cheered until a single, sharp sound cut through the air. Clang! In one move, the human struck. The alien champion hit the ground, his weapon flying into the dust. The arena fell silent. The Queen's smile froze. Her maids stared. Why-I. And then, the Queen whispered words that would change everything. By our law, he owns us now. The alien arena was alive with sound and light. Thousands of alien voices called out the name of their champion. Glowing banners waved in the air, changing colors in rhythm with the crowd's chant. The Queen sat high on her crystal throne, her maids standing close beside her. They looked down at the arena floor, their eyes filled with pride. Their champion had never lost. They had heard about the strange human who had arrived in their city. To them, it was only a small curiosity. He was shorter than their warriors, his skin smooth, without the bright patterns of their kind. His clothing looked plain compared to the shining armor they wore. The idea that he could win against their champion seemed impossible. The gates at the far end of the arena opened, and the champion walked in first. His steps were heavy and strong, each one making the ground tremble. The crowd cheered louder. He wore shining armor, and the long weapon in his hand glowed with energy. Then the other gate opened, and the human entered. His steps were calm, almost too calm. He wore no armor. In his hand was a simple blade, nothing glowing, nothing fancy. The crowd laughed. Some even turned to their neighbors, sure the duel would be over in moments. The champion raised his weapon in salute to the Queen. She smiled, proud of her fighter. Then her eyes moved to the human. He stood still, looking around the arena as if studying every detail. His face showed no fear, no doubt. The sound of the horn echoed, and the duel began. The champion moved first, rushing forward with long, powerful strides. The crowd roared, expecting the human to step back or fall instantly. But the human stayed, calm, waiting. At the last second, he moved to the side. The champion's weapon sliced through the empty air where the human had been a moment ago. The human's blade moved quickly, too fast for many in the crowd to follow. The sound of metal meeting metal rang through the arena. The champion staggered back, his weapon almost slipping from his hands. The crowd's cheer turned into confused murmurs. The human didn't press forward, didn't rush. He simply watched, waiting for the champion's next move. The champion growled in frustration and attacked again. The human stepped aside once more, his movements light and smooth, as if he already knew where each strike would land. Then, in a moment so quick the crowd barely saw it, the human's blade touched the champion's weapon and sent it spinning away. Gasps filled the air. The champion stood frozen, empty-handed. The human lowered his blade and looked directly at the Queen. Silence fell over the arena. The crowd didn't know how to react. Their strongest warrior, the pride of the Queen, had been defeated without the human even breaking a sweat. The Queen's smile faded. Her maids glanced at her nervously. This was not how things were supposed to happen. One of the maids leaned closer to the Queen and whispered, "My Queen, the law of binding." The Queen's eyes narrowed. She looked at the human, still standing in the center of the arena, and spoke in a voice so soft only those closest to her could hear. "By our law, he owns us now." The maids' eyes widened in shock. They knew the old tradition well. It was a law that had existed for centuries, meant to protect the Queen's honor and her people's pride. Whoever defeated her chosen champion in a public duel would become her bound partner. Not just the Queen, but her personal servants as well, would be tied to the victor until the bond was broken, which almost never happened. The human did not hear all of this, but he noticed the way the Queen's expression had changed. Her proud smile was gone, replaced by something else, Something between surprise and calculation, the crowd slowly began to cheer again, though now their voices were mixed with confusion and disbelief. Some shouted the human's name. Others demanded the duel be done again. The queen raised her hand, and the noise faded. The human waited, unsure of what would happen next. The champion stepped back toward the gate, his head lowered. The queen stood from her throne, her long robe flowing down the steps as she descended toward the arena floor. Her maids followed closely behind, their eyes on the human. When she stopped before him, the human noticed that her presence was even more powerful up close. Her eyes were bright and unreadable. "You have won," she said simply. Her voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. "And by our law, that means something you do not yet understand." The human tilted his head, slightly confused. He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but the queen had already turned away. "Guards," she said, "take him to the royal chambers." The human was led away, the sound of the crowd fading behind him. Somewhere deep in the corridors of the palace, he began to wonder if his victory had been a mistake. In the arena above, the queen stood still, watching the empty space where he had been moments ago. Her maids whispered to each other, their voices filled with curiosity and unease. Whatever the future held, they all knew one thing: nothing in their world would ever be the same again. The human followed the guards through long, glowing hallways. The walls shimmered with patterns that shifted like flowing water, and the air smelled faintly of flowers he had never known before. Every step echoed softly, yet the place felt strangely quiet, as if the palace itself was watching him. The guards said nothing. Their armor gleamed under the pale blue lights, and their movements were sharp and precise. At last, they stopped before tall doors carved with symbols the human could not read. One of the guards touched the door, and it opened silently, revealing a room unlike anything he had ever seen. It was wide and filled with soft light, the floor covered in silken fabric that changed color when walked upon. There were tall windows showing the endless alien sky, with distant ships moving like silver birds. A faint music played from somewhere unseen. The maids were already inside, standing in a neat line. They studied him closely, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Each one was dressed in flowing garments, each in a different shade that seemed to match her mood. The queen entered behind him, her steps slow but steady. Her robe trailed behind like a river of gold, and her crown glimmered with tiny stars. She stopped in the center of the room, and the maids lowered their heads. "You may not understand our ways," she said, her voice smooth, "but you are now bound to me, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as one chosen by the law of binding." The human frowned slightly. "Law of binding?" he asked. One of the maids, the youngest of the group, looked at him as if surprised he had spoken. "It is an ancient tradition," she said softly. "When a challenger defeats the queen's chosen protector before the eyes of the people, the victor gains more than honor." Another maid, older and sharper in tone, added, "You are now tied to her by law, by custom, and by fate." The queen's gaze never left him. "You cannot leave this bond unless I release you. And I will not. As of this moment, you live under my roof, eat at my table, and share in my protection." The human's thoughts raced. He had come here expecting only to test himself in a match. Now he was hearing that his life had been completely changed by rules he had never agreed to. The queen seemed to sense his unease. "Do not mistake this for a punishment. In our world, this is the highest honor. You have earned a place beside me." The youngest maid stepped forward slightly, her eyes wide. "But my queen," she began hesitantly. "He does not know what dangers come with that place." The queen's expression darkened just a little, but her voice stayed calm. "He will learn soon enough." Attendants brought a low table between them, carrying plates of strange fruits that shimmered as if dusted with light. The maids moved quietly around the room, pouring drinks that gave off faint steam. Yet despite the beauty of the setting, the air felt heavy with unspoken meaning. The human noticed how some of the maids glanced at him with quiet interest, while others avoided his eyes completely. He could not tell whether they feared him, respected him, or simply did not trust him. When the meal began, the queen spoke again, though her tone was softer now. "You showed skill and calm today. That is rare among warriors, even among my own kind. Such skill will be needed here, more than you know." The human leaned slightly forward. Needed for what? She looked toward the tall windows, her eyes on the far horizon. "Because not all who live under this roof wish to see me remain here. And now, because of the law, you stand in their way." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment no one spoke. The soft music from the walls seemed distant now, like a sound carried from far away. The human sat back, feeling the weight of her meaning without fully understanding it. He had won the duel, but something told him his real challenges were only just beginning. The days in the palace passed slowly for the human, yet every hour seemed to hold something new and strange. The queen did not summon him often, but her presence was felt everywhere. The maids, bound to serve him now as well, moved quietly around him, each one with her own manner. One brought him meals and spoke gently, asking about his home world. Another seemed to avoid him, keeping her gaze low and her words few. A third watched him closely, as if trying to read his thoughts without asking. One evening, a servant led him through winding halls to a room he had not seen before. The walls glowed with a warm amber light, and a long table was set for two. At the far end, the queen waited. She was dressed in deep blue silk that caught the light with every movement. The crown was gone, but the air around her still felt heavy with authority. He sat across from her. The table was filled with dishes whose colors and scents were unfamiliar. She poured him a drink from a crystal jar, the liquid swirling with tiny lights as it filled the cup. "You have been quiet," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "Do you find my world strange?" He gave a small nod. "It is different, beautiful, but full of rules I do not understand." Her lips curved faintly. "Our rules keep the peace, but they also bind us in ways that can be dangerous." She lifted her cup and drank, her gaze never leaving his face. "The man you fought was not only my champion, he was my shield in all things. His place beside me was earned over many years. By defeating him, you have taken that place." The human's brow furrowed. "I didn't come here to take anything from you. I know," she said softly. "But the law does not ask what we want. It only acts for a while." They ate in silence. Then the queen leaned slightly forward, her tone quieter. "There is more you should know. My kingdom is not as secure as it appears. Beyond our borders, another power grows restless. They watch for any weakness. Some believe your victory has made me stronger. Others believe it has made me vulnerable." The human looked at her carefully. "And you? Which do you believe?" Her eyes met his with a strange mixture of caution and something else, perhaps trust, perhaps testing. "I believe the truth will reveal itself soon." Before he could ask more, one of the maids entered, bowing her head. She carried a small silver plate with folded cloth on it, and under the cloth, a faint light flickered. The queen took it, unfolded it, and inside was a glowing crystal no larger than a fist. She held it to her lips and spoke words in her own language. The crystal answered in a voice that was not human, low, smooth, and faintly distorted. It carried through the room like a whisper made of wind. He could not understand the words, but he could hear the tone. It was sharp, questioning. The queen's replies were steady but curt, like someone refusing an offer they did not trust. When the crystal dimmed, she wrapped it again and handed it to the maid without looking at her. The maid bowed and left silently. The human waited, curious, until finally he asked, "Who was that?" Her gaze returned to him, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she replied, "Someone who believes you should not remain here long." The faint music of the palace seemed to fade away in that moment. Her words stayed with him long after the dinner ended, echoing in his mind as he returned to his chambers. He began to wonder if his greatest danger was not the outside threat she spoke of, but something already within these walls. The morning light in the palace was different from any he had known. It poured through tall crystal windows, scattering into soft beams that moved across the floors as if alive. The human woke to the sound of low horns echoing from the city beyond. Something in the air felt heavier than before, as if the palace itself sensed change. From the balcony outside his room, he could see the horizon. Strange shapes floated in the distant sky, sleek silver vessels that glinted under the twin suns. They moved slowly but with purpose, forming patterns that spoke of discipline, even without knowing their origin. He understood they were not part of the Queen's fleet. The knock on his door was soft but quick. When it opened, two maids entered. One carried folded robes of fine cloth, the other a polished belt holding a weapon shaped unlike any he had seen before. "The Queen asks for you," the first said, her voice calm but her eyes tight with something. Closed to worry, they led him to a grand hall where the Queen stood near the wide windows. Advisors and guards surrounded her, their voices low. When she turned to him, her expression was steady, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had already made difficult choices. "Those ships you see," she began, gesturing toward the horizon, "belong to the empire that watches us from afar. They have tested our borders before. Now they send more than ships, they send messages." One of the advisors stepped forward. "And they have learned of the human." The Queen nodded slightly. "They see your victory as a shift in our power. In their eyes, it is either a challenge or an invitation." The human said nothing, letting the words sink in. She stepped closer. "You are now my bound champion. It is not only a title, it is a position that demands you stand with me when my kingdom is threatened. Whether you choose it or not, the law binds you to this." The maids entered then, carrying strange pieces of armor, lighter than what the champion had worn, but still strong. They placed them on a low table, along with a curved blade that shimmered faintly when it caught the light. "You will be trained in our ways," the Queen said, "not only in combat, but in the customs that govern how we speak, how we move, and how we are seen. Every gesture you make will speak for me." As the training began in the palace gardens, the maids took turns guiding him. One taught him the meanings of hand signs and bows. Another showed him the silent language of the eyes that carried more weight than spoken words. The youngest maid, shy at first, revealed secret paths through the palace grounds, explaining which areas were safe and which were not. But even in these lessons, he noticed something odd. Whenever he asked about certain parts of the palace, their answers were vague. If he pressed too far, the conversation would change. That night, as the moons rose over the city, he returned to his chambers. The quiet felt heavier than usual, the distant hum of the palace softer, as if holding its breath. When he turned toward his bed, he froze. One of the maids stood in the shadows near the door. She held something in her hands, a small object wrapped in cloth. Her face was unreadable. "You should not be here alone," she said quietly. He stepped closer, the soft light revealing her eyes. There was no fear in them, only a strange resolve. "What do you mean?" he asked. She glanced toward the door as if to be sure no one listened, then met his gaze again. "Because someone in this palace does not want you to remain here at all." The human studied the maid in the dim glow of the room, trying to read her face. She held the small object with both hands, as if it were something precious or dangerous. Her voice was low, each word chosen with care. "There are eyes in this palace that do not blink," she said. "They see everything, even in silence. And some of those eyes belong to people who would rather see you gone." He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "Gone, as in," she shook her head slightly. "Gone from the Queen's side. Gone from the palace. Gone from this world. If they could have it." Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of urgency. She unwrapped the cloth, revealing a slender crystal no longer than his palm. Inside it, faint sparks of light swirled slowly, forming shapes that vanished before they could be understood. "This is a message," she explained. "Not for you, at least, not directly. It was left where only I would find it. That means whoever sent it knows my movements, and yours." The human took a step back, glancing toward the tall windows where the night sky spilled silver light into the room. "What does it say?" She hesitated before answering. "It is not written in words. It's a warning, hidden in patterns. The kind of patterns only a trained court messenger would understand." She paused, eyes meeting his. "It means you will be tested soon, not in open halls, where the Queen can protect you, but somewhere you will be alone." He let out a slow breath. "Why tell me?" Her gaze softened, though her voice stayed steady. "Because you do not yet know how dangerous the quiet parts of this palace can be. And because," as she stopped herself, choosing a different path, Because the queen chose you. If something happens to you, it will weaken her. And some here would see that as an opportunity. Before he could respond, distant footsteps echoed down the hallway. She quickly wrapped the crystal again and pressed it into his hand. Hide this. Do not let the guards see it. If they ask, you never spoke to me tonight. The door slid open a moment later, and the guards appeared. They bowed slightly, but kept their expressions neutral. The queen requests your presence in the moonlit hall, one said. The maid stepped back into the shadows, lowering her gaze as if she had only been delivering a routine message. Without another word, she slipped out through a side door, leaving the faint scent of some strange, sweet flower behind her. The guards escorted him through winding corridors, their polished boots making no sound on the smooth floors. The palace was different at night, colder, quieter, the light from the moon filtering through crystal arches in long silver bands. Statues of past rulers lined the hallways, their eyes carved so perfectly they seemed almost alive. When they reached the moonlit hall, the queen was there, standing beside a long, shallow pool that reflected the sky. She turned when she saw him, her expression calm, but her eyes sharper than before. You walked the palace at late hours, she said softly. That is unusual for someone still learning its ways. He chose his words carefully. I was thinking. Walking helps me understand the shape of this place. She regarded him for a long moment, then gestured toward the pool. Shapes can be deceiving. Sometimes they are drawn to hide what is truly beneath. The water in the pool rippled faintly. Though no wind moved through the hall, somewhere far above, a faint hum began to grow, like the sound of distant wings. The queen's gaze shifted upward, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that he could not name, part warning, part anticipation. The sound above grew into a steady vibration, as if the palace itself was resonating with some distant force. The human glanced at the queen, but she did not move. Her gaze remained fixed on the mirrored surface of the pool, as though it held answers only she could see. Then the water began to change. The reflection of the twin moons shimmered, distorted by ripples that seemed to come from beneath, not from the air. Shapes formed in the water, soft, blurred outlines that grew clearer with each passing heartbeat. They were not ships nor people, but symbols, loops, lines, and spirals he did not understand. The queen spoke without looking at him. What you see is a message. It comes from the outer borders of my realm. Few can read it, but all who see it feel its weight. He took a step closer, watching the patterns twist into something almost like writing. What does it say? Her voice was steady, yet low enough that even the guards posted near the doors could not hear. It says that the Empire has crossed into our shadow space. It says they do not come to talk. She turned to him finally, her eyes sharp as crystal edges, and it says that they know you are here. The human felt the cool air press against his skin. If they know I'm here, then I'm not just a symbol of your law anymore. I'm a target. That, she said, is why I brought you here tonight. She motioned toward the far end of the hall, where a tall archway opened into darkness. The guards stepped aside, revealing a narrow passage lit only by faint blue lines along the walls. Beyond that corridor is the Vault of Echoes. It is where we keep things too important to trust to any living guard. Tonight, you will see it. They walked together into the passage. The sound from the pool faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the walls themselves. Each step echoed softly, as though the corridor had no true end. The air grew cooler, carrying a faint scent of stone and something older, metal, perhaps, or the memory of storms. The passage opened into a vast chamber. High above, the ceiling was carved into a spiral that seemed to turn slowly, though he could not tell if it was truly moving or if the light played tricks on his eyes. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a sphere of glass-like crystal. Inside, currents of golden light swirled in constant motion, shifting into shapes that almost looked alive. This, the queen said, approaching the pedestal, is the heart of a cord. It is older than my throne, older than the empire itself. It binds our treaties, seals our oaths, and records every promise kept and broken in my realm. And now she paused, resting her hand gently on the sphere. It holds your name. The human felt an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest. You put my name into it. Yes, when you defeated my champion, The law recognized you as part of the royal bond. The heart accepted you without question. But that bond works both ways. Your fate is now tied to mine. He circled the pedestal slowly, drawn to the shifting light within the sphere. What happens if the heart is destroyed? Her gaze darkened. Then every bond it holds shatters, every oath, every treaty. The realm would fall into chaos overnight. That is why the Empire wants it, and why they may use you to reach it. Before he could reply, the sphere pulsed once, twice, then flared with sudden brilliance. The golden light inside twisted violently, forming a shape so clear it made him freeze. The outline of a ship, long and sleek, marked with the same spirals he had seen earlier in the pool. The Queen's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "They are closer than I thought." In that moment, the hum in the walls grew louder again, and somewhere far above, the sound of a deep, resonant chime rolled through the palace. It was not a sound of celebration, it was a call to prepare. And as he stood beside the heart of a chord, he realized the Maid's warning, the Queen's secrecy, and the Empire's presence were all threads of the same weave. The test was not coming, it was already here, and it had just begun to unfold around him.